You ever stop and wonder what the most expensive mistakes in human history actually are? And I'm not talking about, denting your car or making a bad stock pick. No, no. We are talking about single, solitary errors that completely wiped out fortunes, tragically ended lives, and literally changed the course of history forever.
It almost always starts with something small, something that seems totally harmless at the time. Maybe a tiny oversight on a super long checklist, or a simple calculation that's just off by a little bit.
Or maybe it's just one single choice, a choice made under a ton of pressure, or with, let's be honest, way too much confidence. That one split second where someone says go for it when they absolutely should have said hold on.
And the result of that one little thing? A catastrophic chain reaction that leads to a price tag so huge it's actually hard to wrap your head around it. So today we're going to dive into the blunders that cost billions.
Okay, first up, we're starting with a story of pure hubris and just catastrophic failure. Let's go back in time to 1986, to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This was a place where a totally routine test was about to become anything but. Just look at that number for a second. Let it sink in. $200 billion. That's the estimated cost of the Chernobyl disaster when you factor in everything. The cleanup, the long-term healthcare, the environmental damage. It's a figure that's almost impossible to even imagine.
So how on earth could something like this even happen? Well, the crazy part is it all started with a safety test. Yeah, a safety test. It was this perfect storm of a flawed procedure, some really bad design flaws in the reactor itself, and then critical human errors made by operators under immense pressure. It all came together to create a massive explosion that just tore the reactor apart and spewed radioactive fallout all across Europe.
All right, from nuclear power, let's head out to the open ocean. Our next story is probably the most famous disaster of all time. It's the tale of a ship that was famously, and as it turns out, fatally, described as unsinkable.
Now, while the initial loss back then was in the millions, if you adjust for inflation and you think about the value of that ship and all its cargo today, you're talking billions. But of course, we all know the true cost wasn't measured in dollars, but in human lives. Look, everyone knows the Titanic hit an iceberg, but here's the thing that gets missed. It didn't have to. The crew got multiple, really specific warnings about massive ice fields directly in their path, but they were so overconfident in their unsinkable ship that they kept going at a dangerously high speed. The real mistake wasn't the iceberg, it was the sheer arrogance that steered them right into it.
Now, that same kind of arrogance takes a whole new form when we jump from the industrial age's faith in steel to the digital age's faith in computer code. We're heading into the crazy, high-speed world of stock trading, where a mistake doesn't take hours to unfold, it happens in seconds.
$500 million. That's what this next mistake cost. A loss so insane, it nearly bankrupted the entire company responsible in less than an hour.
So get this, in 2012, a big trading firm called Knight Capital rolled out some new trading software. But there was a glitch, basically a typo in the code, that caused the entire system to go absolutely haywire. It just started buying and selling stocks like crazy, flooding the market with trades they never meant to make. The result? 45 minutes of pure chaos and a loss of over $460 million, all from one tiny glitch.
All right, from Wall Street, let's go to outer space. This next error, honestly, it's almost hard to believe because of how simple it is. It's 1999, and NASA is all set to get a brand new weather satellite into orbit around Mars.
The mission cost $125 million. I mean, this thing was a cutting-edge piece of tech, years in the making, sent flying across millions of miles of space, only for it to just disappear. It vanished without a trace when it got there. And the reason why? It's just astounding.
The problem was just so simple, it's painful. One engineering team at NASA used metric units, meters, kilograms. But another contractor, they used imperial units, feet and pounds. And nobody caught the mix-up. So when the spacecraft fired its thrusters to get into orbit, the navigation math was completely wrong. The orbiter flew way too low and just burned up in the Martian atmosphere. A $125 million mission gone because of a middle school math conversion error.
Okay, all of these mistakes were obviously huge, but our final example, this one affected the entire planet. And it wasn't just one error, but a whole waterfall of them, building on each other, until the entire system just came crashing down. The 2008 financial crisis.
The financial cost here, it's not even measured in millions or billions anymore. We're talking trillions. An economic wipeout so unbelievably massive that we're still feeling its effects today, more than a decade later.
So what happened? Well, the short version is that banks took on these enormous, unchecked risks with really complicated financial products that were all tied to home loans. People were given mortgages they could never, ever hope to repay. And when those homeowners started to default, the whole house of cards just collapsed. It was this perfect storm of greed, bad regulations, and a chain of awful decisions that hurt millions of everyday people who lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings.
So we've looked at a nuclear disaster, a sunken ship, a software glitch, a lost spaceship, and a global economic meltdown. I mean, they all seem totally different on the surface, right? But what's the one thing, the common thread that ties all of them together?
It all comes down to the human factor, but it's actually more specific than that. It's about these predictable patterns in how we think. With the Titanic, you see this massive overconfidence, this belief that bad things won't happen to us. At NASA, it was poor communication. Teams just failed to double-check each other's work. And across the board, from Chernobyl to the 2008 crisis, you see how that same overconfidence can make smart people completely blind to crystal-clear warning signs. These aren't just random flukes. They're the result of the mental shortcuts our brains take every single day.
And that, right there, is the really scary part, isn't it? Our technology gets more and more incredible, but the person operating it, the human being, we stay pretty much the same. We're still vulnerable to the same biases, the same pride, and the same simple slip-ups that have caused disasters all throughout history.
And that's really the big takeaway here. It's this powerful reminder that in our super complex, interconnected world, paying attention to the details, having a little humility, and communicating clearly, well, they aren't just good ideas. They're absolutely critical, because sometimes the smallest error is all it takes.
So what about you? Which one of these mistakes just blew your mind the most? Was it the unbelievable simplicity of the Mars orbiter error, or just the sheer terrifying scale of the 2008 crisis? Let us know down in the comments.
If you found this explainer as eye-opening as I did, do us a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that really shape our world. Thanks so much for watching.